The sky above Draveth burned crimson as the red dragon pack assembled beneath the molten horizon. Ash drifted from the volcano ridges, painting their scales in streaks of ember light. At the center stood Veil Core, Pack Alpha, his wings unfurled to their full, battle-hardened span. Each scar along his neck was a history written in fire, marks of wars fought against those who dared trespass upon dragonkind. The air vibrated with low growls and the simmer of vengeance. Word had spread through the broodlink. Their hatchlings had been taken. The signal came 3 nights ago, a transmission from deep space, cut short by static and a dying cry. The scent of human interference lingered in the data signature. Humans, the frail flesh things who clawed their way into the stars, had violated sacred ground once more. And now they had dared to touch what no being should, dragon young. Veil Core lowered his snout toward the molten ground, inhaling deeply through the vents along his throat. Beneath the acrid smoke, faint traces of psychic energy trembled, familiar, fragile, alive. His mate, Sereth, stood beside him, eyes closed as her horns glowed faintly with brood light. "I feel them," she whispered into his mind. "Faint, but breathing. They are not gone." Her words struck through his rage like a blade through armor. Oh, it was poison and purpose both. Around them, the pack rumbled in agreement, dozens of colossal beasts armored in burnished metal plates, their talons flexing against the rock. The youngest among them snarled, "We fly now, Alpha. Burn their worlds. Tear open their steel nests and feed them to the ash." Veil Core silenced him with a single glare. His golden eyes gleamed like twin suns breaking through storm clouds. "We fly," he said, his voice deep as tectonic thunder, "but not to rage blindly. We retrieve what is ours. Then, we end them." Engines roared to life across the valley as their warships, living extensions of dragon anatomy fused with technology, began their ascent. Each vessel's hull resembled an enormous beast mid-roar, teeth of alloy and wings forged in plasma crucibles. The atmosphere shook as they rose through the volcanic haze and vanished into the blackness of space. Inside his command vessel, Veil Core felt the pulse of warp channels flicker against his scales. Stars elongated, then burst into crimson streaks as they leapt through the void toward Eidolon 9, the human colony whose coordinates pulsed in the distress beacon. His mind replayed every rumor he'd heard about the species, that they dissected their enemies to understand them, that they turned death into invention, that they learned faster than any race should. But what burned most was the memory of the first human ambassador years ago standing small and trembling before him. "We mean no harm to your kind," the human had said. Veil Core had crushed the man's insignia in his claw and walked away unconvinced. Now, as the warp tunnel folded open, Eidolon 9 emerged, a wasteland moon cloaked in storm. The human outpost below shimmered with weak energy signatures, its defense grid scarred by recent attacks. Veil Core's second-in-command, Raxthor, tilted his head. "Their weapons sleep. Perhaps they expect mercy. Then they have forgotten who we are," Veil Core growled. The fleet descended in coordinated silence. No warnings. No parley. Only the hum of re-entry and the flare of plasma wings slicing through the atmosphere. Human radar flickered briefly before dying entirely under the electromagnetic storm of dragon vessels. The pack spread across the horizon like the shadow of a dying sun. When Veil Core landed, the impact cracked the soil. The heat of his breath turned sand to glass. He surveyed the desolate settlement, a scattering of metal domes and burnt transport vehicles. Smoke curled from craters. Whatever battle had happened here had ended quickly, but the scent of blood still lingered. Raxthor sniffed the air. "I smell their rot. The humans are near." Sereth approached, her tail sweeping Ash aside. "No," she said softly, "the hatchlings were here. Their warmth lingers." She pressed her claws to the ground and closed her eyes, her body trembling. "There is something else, faint beneath the ruins. Not human. Not dragon. A mixture." Veil Core moved toward the largest structure, a cracked dome, its walls half melted by plasma fire. A human banner, shredded by wind, clung to its side. He tore the entry gate away with a single pull. Inside, darkness reigned, broken only by the flicker of emergency lights. The floor was littered with debris, burned equipment, overturned consoles, shattered containment pods. He stepped forward, claws clicking softly against the metal floor. The scent of iron and ozone thickened. Every muscle in his massive frame tensed, ready to kill. Behind him, Raxthor's tail lashed impatiently, his breath hot and wild. Then, a sound. Soft. Irregular. Breathing. Veil Core froze. From beyond the shattered consoles came a faint cooing noise, high-pitched and innocent. He moved closer, lowering his head to peer through the smoke. What he saw stilled even his ancient heart. A human lay against the far wall, armor scorched, chest rising shallowly with labored breath. His face was pale beneath streaks of soot and blood. And upon that human's chest, nestled between his arms as though born there, 2 dragon hatchlings slept. Their tiny wings flickered with dim crimson light, their scales still soft and new. They breathed in rhythm with the man's heartbeat. Sereth gasped behind him. The brood link flared open, flooding Veilcor's mind with a pulse of recognition. His children. His hatchlings. Alive. Their psychic signatures glowed faintly, wrapped in something strange, warmth. Human warmth. Raxter lunged forward, snarling. It's a trick. They use our young as bait. But Veilcor raised a single claw, halting him. His gaze remained locked on the human. The man stirred faintly, his eyes fluttering open. They were a dull gray, clouded by exhaustion, yet calm, eerily calm. When he saw the dragons surrounding him, he didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't even flinch. Instead, his lips parted in a whisper, barely audible over the crackle of smoldering wires. Please, the human murmured, voice hoarse. They just fell asleep. The words hung in the air, fragile as glass. The pack, beasts of legend and terror, stood silent. Even Raxter's growl faded to a rasp. The hatchlings stirred, one letting out a tiny chirp before nuzzling deeper against the man's armor. Veilcor's throat tightened. He stepped closer, lowering his head until his breath brushed across the human's face. You kept them alive? He asked, the words resonating through both sound and mind. The man blinked slowly, then gave the faintest nod before his body sagged again. Tried to keep them warm. They wouldn't eat without. His voice trailed off into unconsciousness. Sereth moved forward, her eyes gleaming wet with molten tears. They're unhurt. They've bonded to him. Raxter hissed. Abomination. Kill the thief, reclaim the young. Veilcor didn't move. His heart thundered in confusion, rage, awe. He could feel through the brood link that his hatchlings were safe. Utterly, impossibly safe. Their tiny minds radiated trust, contentment, affection. Toward this fragile creature who should have been their enemy. Outside, lightning forked across the storm sky, illuminating the ruins in a wash of scarlet light. Veilcor exhaled slowly, the smoke curling like sorrow. The war he had come to wage faltered before it even began. He looked down once more at the unconscious human and the sleeping hatchlings pressed to his chest. A strange thought, alien and unwelcome, sparked in his mind. Perhaps humans were not the monsters after all. And as the storm raged on outside the dome, Veilcor knew one truth with terrifying clarity: this war was no longer about vengeance. It had just become something far more dangerous. The human awoke to the sound of claws scraping metal and the sharp scent of ozone burning the air. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with red-scaled titans. Heat rolled off their bodies in shimmering waves, and eyes like molten gold watched his every breath. He could barely move, every muscle screamed with exhaustion. The hatchlings stirred against his chest, chirping softly. Instinctively, he placed a trembling hand over them, his pulse quickening as one of the dragons, massive beyond imagining, leaned closer. Veilcor lowered his head until his eye filled the soldier's entire world. The dragon's pupil contracted to a thin slit, gleaming with restrained fury. Human, he said, his voice like the grinding of stone, speak before my patience ends. What have you done to them? Orion Hale swallowed against the dryness in his throat. Words felt foreign on his tongue after so many silent days. I didn't do anything. I found them. His gaze flicked toward the sleeping hatchlings. They were dying. The air grew heavier. Every dragon in the room shifted, the sound of their scales like boulders grinding together. One of them, smaller but still enormous, snarled, "Lies. The humans steal and slaughter our kind. You expect us to believe you rescued them?" Veilcor silenced the protest with a growl. Let him speak. Orion tried to lift himself, but pain flared through his ribs. He pressed his back against the wall and took shallow breaths. My ship, it wasn't a war vessel. We were scientists, studying radiation patterns in the belt. We intercepted a distress signal, weak, unregistered. When we reached the coordinates, there was wreckage everywhere. His eyes grew distant, haunted. The escape pods were shattered. The 2 of them were all that was left. Their wings were burned. They were crying. The word lingered strangely in the air, crying, a sound that dragons rarely associated with their kind. Veilcore felt the broodlink pulse faintly as if the hatchlings remembered. Their tiny claws flexed against the human's armor. Orion continued, his voice growing steadier as he spoke. We took them aboard. Fed them warmth from the engine heat. I learned to feed them from plasma synths. When pirates attacked the research convoy, I stayed behind to cover the evacuation. The lab was hit. Everyone else died. He looked down at the hatchlings, a faint, tired smile crossing his lips. They wouldn't leave me after that. I think they thought I was one of them. Saratha's talons clicked softly as she approached, her eyes shining with maternal anguish. They bonded with you. Impossible yet. I feel it. Veilcore's tail lashed once, his rage smoldering beneath the surface. The thought that a human, a fragile creature of soft flesh and carbon bones, had entered the sacred psychic bond of his brood was unthinkable. But denial could not undo what he felt through the link. His children were content, even joyful, in the presence of this man. You fed them, Veilcore said slowly. You sheltered them. Why? Orion met his gaze. His voice was quiet but unwavering. Because they were alive. And afraid. That was enough. The words landed like a blade between them. Veilcore's instincts warred with his reason. Every tale of human cruelty echoed through his memory, every warning about their hunger for power. Yet this one had risked his life for dragon hatchlings he did not even understand. The contradiction unsettled him. Raxthor moved closer, his claws sparking against the floor. We should end this farce. He kept them alive to use them. His kind always has a purpose behind their pity. Then why is he dying? Sarath snapped, turning toward Raxthor. Look at him, his blood seeps into the floor. He has no weapon, no armor left. Only them. She motioned toward the hatchlings who now clung to Orion's hand. Does that look like deceit to you? Raxthor bared his fangs but Veilcore's voice cut through the rising growls. Enough. I will decide his fate. He stepped closer, towering above Orion. The heat of his breath washed over the man like a storm wind. You are surrounded by death, human. One word from me and your bones will turn to ash. Yet you do not tremble. Why? Orion's cracked lips formed a faint smile. Maybe because I've already done what I came to do. The dragons exchanged uncertain glances. Veilcore tilted his head. And what is that? I kept them safe, Orion said simply. If you're here for them, then I've finished my job. Silence swallowed the chamber. For a long moment, only the hum of flickering lights and the hatchlings' tiny breaths filled the air. Veilcore studied the man. His ruined armor, the burns across his skin, the dull sheen of resolve in his eyes. There was no deceit there. Only exhaustion and something deeper. Devotion. Sarath lowered her head beside Veilcore's. If he dies, she whispered, they will grieve. Veilcore's claws curled against the floor, leaving deep grooves in the metal. He could not deny the truth, he felt the echo of it through the bond. The hatchling's contentment faltered every time Orion's pulse weakened. Raxthor's patience broke. This is madness. You would let a human breathe while our kind rots in their prisons? Veilcore's head snapped toward him, and his roar thundered through the chamber. Touch him, and you defy the bond of the brood. The younger dragon recoiled, stunned by the command. The others fell into silence. Even the air seemed to shudder beneath the alpha's fury. When the echoes faded, Veilcore turned back to the human. The defiance in his voice softened into something heavier, almost reluctant. You risked your life for creatures you did not know. You could have left them to die, yet you chose otherwise. What drives you, Orion Hail of Earth? Orion's eyes flickered with a faint, weary amusement. What drives any parent? He whispered. You hear them cry and you answer. The simplicity of the answer struck Veilcore harder than any weapon. For the first time in his long existence, he found himself without words. The ancient instincts that had ruled him, the code of vengeance, the pride of his lineage, felt suddenly brittle. Sarath touched her snout gently to the hatchlings, who chirped and wriggled in delight. They love him, she murmured. They do not know species. Only warmth. Veilcore felt the truth settle into him like a heavy stone. The universe he had known, divided, cruel, eternal in its hierarchies, had just cracked open. He lowered his gaze to Orion, who was barely conscious now, his breath shallow. You will live, human, he said quietly. By my will. You have earned the protection of the brood. Raxthor hissed from the shadows. You break the law of blood for a stranger. Veilcore turned toward him, eyes blazing. Then perhaps the law must change. The air thickened with the weight of that declaration. The pack stirred uneasily, ancient instincts colliding with something new, doubt, perhaps even respect. Orion's head lolled to the side, exhaustion claiming him again. One of the hatchlings climbed toward his throat and nestled beneath his chin. Veilcore watched in silence, his mind a storm of thoughts he could no longer name. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, echoing through the ruined dome like the heartbeat of something vast and inevitable. Veilcore glanced once more at the human who had upended everything he believed, and in that moment, he understood that their war was no longer simple. It was no longer about vengeance or pride. It was about the fragile thread of something far more dangerous than hatred. Understanding. An understanding he knew could reshape worlds. Dawn never reached Eidolon 9. The storm-racked sky only shifted from black to a deeper shade of gray. Within the cracked dome, the air grew thick with tension as the Red Dragon pack surrounded their wounded alpha and the frail human who had defied death to protect their hatchlings. The silence was alive with restrained violence, every breath drawn like the moment before a strike. Veilcore stood between worlds, his pack behind him, their loyalty tempered by fury, and before him, a dying man who had changed everything he thought immutable. The hatchlings slept once more on Orion's chest, small embers of life in a field of ash. Sereth hovered nearby, eyes dim with worry. "He grows weaker," she whispered. "If he fades, they will not understand why." Raxthor's snarl cut through her words. "Then let them learn the truth early. Humans die. Better he perishes now than poisons our kind with softness." Veilcore turned slowly. His shadow fell across the younger dragon, his gaze cold as obsidian. "You speak of strength," he said, "but you confuse it with cruelty." Raxthor slammed his tail against the floor, sending a shockwave through the chamber. "We are dragons, Veilcore. We are not caretakers of prey. While you dote over this human, the rest of his species sharpens their blades beyond the stars." He bared his fangs. "Every moment we waste here dishonors our ancestors." Outside, a distant rumble echoed, engines. The humans of the outpost had awakened, their scanners detecting the dragon's presence. The tremor of marching boots reached the dome. Sereth's head snapped toward the sound. More humans come. Veilcore inhaled sharply, tasting the scent of adrenaline and gunpowder. Through the thin psychic hum of the air, he felt the hatchlings stir, their innocent minds flickering with confusion and fear. The broodlink pulsed erratically, pain rippling through it like static. Orion groaned and opened his eyes. His voice was a whisper, dry as dust. "Don't hurt them. You need rest," Sereth said gently. "No," Orion rasped, his gaze finding Veilcore's immense form. "Listen to me. My people, if they see you they'll shoot first. They won't understand. You have to leave." Raxthor laughed, a deep, venomous sound. "He warns us as though we fear their sticks of metal." Orion coughed, each word costing him breath. "You think you're invincible, but they won't stop. They'll bring ships. Bombardments. You'll all die here, and so will your young." Veilcore's wings twitched, the edges scraping sparks from the walls. For a moment, the human's voice sounded eerily similar to his own thoughts. He had led countless wars, crushed enemies under his flame, but none had fought like humans. They did not stop. They learned. They adapted. Boots thundered closer. Outside, the whine of human rifles charged the air. Commander Reese's voice blared through a comm amplifier. "Unidentified entities inside the dome, surrender immediately." Sereth flinched. The hatchlings began to cry, their high-pitched wails vibrating through the psychic field. The dragons shifted uneasily, their instincts demanded protection. Veilcore looked down at Orion. "You call this mercy? Your kind approaches with weapons drawn." Orion tried to lift his head, agony etched into his expression. "They don't know. To them you're monsters. To me you're—" He stopped, breath ragged. "They just need to see you're not." "Then show them," Veilcore said. Orion blinked in disbelief. "You'd trust me with that?" "You carried my children through death," the Alpha replied. "You can carry a message." Before Orion could respond, the dome's entrance exploded inward. A squad of armored humans flooded the chamber, weapons raised. The dragons recoiled, wings unfurling in reflex, scales flaring with heat. One false move and the air would ignite. Commander Reese's visor reflected crimson light as he took in the sight, colossal dragons surrounding a bleeding lieutenant cradling alien hatchlings. "Lieutenant Hale?" His voice trembled. "What in God's name?" Orion forced himself upright, holding one trembling hand outward. "Stand down, Commander. Don't shoot." Reese's eyes darted between the dragons. "Are you out of your mind? Those things." "They're not things," Orion interrupted. They're children. And their parents are listening. He gestured weakly toward Veilcore. That's their leader. He's not our enemy. Rhys's finger tightened on the trigger. You expect me to believe that? After what they did to Outpost Theta. Raxter's growl shook the ground. Your kind struck first, insect. Rhys's squad flinched, weapons rising. In that heartbeat of chaos, the hatchlings shrieked in terror. The psychic backlash struck everyone at once, images flashing through their minds, fire, hunger, warmth, and the steady rhythm of Orion's heartbeat. The commander stumbled, disoriented, lowering his weapon. What was that? Orion swayed, gasping. They're afraid. Sereth moved forward slowly, her massive form deliberate, controlled. She lowered her head until her snout nearly touched the floor. If you harm them, you harm us all, she said, her voice resonating like a temple bell. Rhys hesitated. His men looked to him, waiting. The hatchlings' cries softened, replaced by gentle coos as they sensed calm. For the first time, two species who had slaughtered each other for decades stood still, not in hatred but in fragile awe. Then Raxter ruined it. Enough of this weakness, he roared. His wings spread wide, knocking debris aside. We were not made to beg. Before anyone could react, he lunged toward the commander, fire already building in his throat. Veilcore moved faster. He slammed into Raxter, claws raking across his lieutenant's chest. The impact thundered like an earthquake. The humans scattered for cover as the two dragons collided again, teeth and flame and fury exploding across the chamber. Sparks showered down. Metal screamed. Raxter's tail struck Veilcore's flank, drawing a bellow of pain. You've betrayed your own kind for prey. Raxter roared. Veilcore's reply was a roar that shook the heavens. No. I have remembered what it means to protect. Their bodies crashed through support beams, the dome trembling under the weight of their battle. Orion shielded the hatchlings with his arms as dust and fire rained from above. Humans watched in terrified silence, unable to interfere, unable to look away. Finally, Veilcore pinned Raxter against the cracked floor, his claws pressing deep into the younger dragon's chest. This ends, he snarled. We are more than our fury. Raxter spat blood. You are no alpha. Veilcore's eyes blazed brighter than flame. Then learn what it costs to defy one. He drove his claw through Raxter's chest. The dragon's body convulsed, then stilled. A wave of psychic energy rippled outward, anger, pain, and finality merging into silence. When it was over, Veilcore stood trembling, blood steaming on his talons. The humans stared in stunned quiet. The hatchlings whimpered softly, sensing the grief that followed. Veilcore turned to Orion, his chest heaving. You see, human, he said hoarsely, our kind destroys itself long before yours needs to. Orion met his gaze with weary eyes. Maybe that's why we need each other. Veilcore's expression shifted, something unreadable flickered behind those molten eyes. He glanced toward the human soldiers. Go, he commanded. Take him. Heal him. If he dies, the bond dies with him. Commander Rhys hesitated, still pale with disbelief, but one look at Orion's fading form broke his resistance. He signaled his squad, and together they lifted the lieutenant carefully. The hatchlings cried, reaching for him, their tiny claws scraping at Veilcore's scales. The alpha lowered his head beside them. He will live, he promised softly. You have my word. Outside, lightning split the sky open, illuminating the ruin around them. The storm howled like a creature reborn, and for the first time Veilcore felt that same storm inside his chest. Wild, uncertain, alive. The war for blood had ended in that broken dome, but what would rise in its place was far more perilous. A fragile, impossible hope. The Red Dragon Pack descended in fire and fury. Their wings tore the clouds apart, their roars split the mountain air, and the ground trembled under their wrath. The night sky burned crimson as they arrived, not as visitors, not as diplomats, but as executioners seeking retribution. Their hatchlings had been stolen, and their blood boiled for vengeance. Every heart among them beat with the same singular purpose: find the thief and end him. But the human didn't run. He stood outside his modest steel shelter, the cold wind tousling his hair, his face steady despite the inferno above. Captain Jareth Hale had faced monsters before, pirates, assassins, even the vacuum of space, but none quite like the Red Dragon Pack. The pack's leader, Lord Karath, landed first, his talons digging trenches into the rock. His molten eyes narrowed upon the human, and the sheer presence of him was like standing before a star. Human, Karath thundered, his voice resonating like molten metal on stone, you dare steal from the kin of flame? Our young, Our legacy, rest in your den. What trickery is this? Jareth didn't flinch. He simply turned toward the entryway of the shelter and said, "They're asleep." A low rumble spread through the dragons. Some snarled, some growled in disbelief. Sleep? Dragons slept in volcanic cradles, not beside prey. Karatha's wings flared, lighting the ground with embers. "If you mock me, human, I will reduce this world to ash." "Then you'll wake them," Jareth replied softly. His voice carried no defiance, only quiet conviction. "And they've had a long night." Karath hesitated, an emotion flickering across his molten eyes, confusion. The human stepped aside, allowing the dragon to peer inside the shelter. Within, the flickering light revealed a sight that rooted every dragon to silence. 3 hatchlings, scaled, wingless, small, slept sprawled across the human's chest. One's claws gently clutched his uniform sleeve. Another's tail was coiled against his ribs, twitching lightly in dream. The last, the smallest, had its head tucked beneath his chin, breathing slow, soft puffs of smoke. Karatha's fire dimmed. Around him, the others shifted uneasily, their rage dissolving into something unspoken. The human didn't move. He simply watched them watch the hatchlings as if every breath might shatter the fragile peace. Finally, Karath stepped forward, his voice quieter now, yet still rough with power. "Explain," he demanded. Jareth drew a slow breath. "Your transport ship crashed 3 days ago in Sector 9. I found them half buried in glassed rock, heat signatures fading. I thought they were dying. So I took them in." "Foolish creature," hissed another dragon. "You should have left them. Our kind heals in fire." "Not these," Jareth countered. They'd been in a coolant explosion. Their scales were coated in cryofoam. Fire would have killed them. Karath stared long and hard at the human. His gaze pierced deeper than anger, beyond even comprehension. He saw something there that unsettled him. Care, unguarded and uncalculated. "And you fed them?" he asked slowly. Jareth nodded. "Protein serum. And warmth. My body temp was the closest match to their hatching nest." The silence that followed was unlike any the mountains had ever held. Then, softly from within the shelter, a hatchling stirred, the smallest one. Its eyes fluttered open, revealing molten gold irises identical to Karatha's. It yawned, stretched, and let out a tiny squeaky chirp. Karath froze. The creature blinked, spotted the enormous shadow in the doorway and chirped again, this time louder, happier. It called him father. The great dragon trembled. His tail lashed once, not in fury but in something dangerously close to emotion. He lowered his head, close enough that his breath stirred the dust at the human's feet. The hatchling wriggled free from Jareth's chest and waddled toward the massive creature, unafraid, pressing its head against the scales that had birthed it. Karath closed his eyes. A sound escaped him, deep, guttural, almost like pain. "You kept them alive." "I did what anyone would do," Jareth murmured. "No," Karath said, lifting his head slowly. "Not anyone. Your kind kills what it fears." "Then maybe," Jareth said quietly, "you've been looking at the wrong kind of human." The dragons stirred again, their wings rustling, their fire dimming to embers. Karatha's gaze softened, slightly, and for the first time he regarded the human not as a thief or prey, but as something else entirely. "You understand what this means, human?" he asked. "I understand they're alive," Jareth replied. "And that's enough." Karath turned his head toward the other dragons. Their eyes met his, awaiting command. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might still destroy the human out of sheer pride. But then the smallest hatchling sneezed a tiny spark, startling itself, and the entire pack let out a low, rippling vibration that could almost be mistaken for laughter. The air changed. The tension bled away like smoke. Karath spoke again, his tone softer but resolute. "You have done what no outsider has ever done, cared for the flame without burning. You have our debt, Jareth Hale." Jareth gave a small nod. "Keep them safe. That's all I ask." Karath inclined his great head. "They already are." He paused, his molten eyes lingering on the human one last time. "And so are you." As the dragons took flight, the mountains shook once more, not with wrath this time, but with a resonant echo of something new, respect. The night sky blazed as their wings carried them beyond the peaks, their hatchlings safe once more. Jareth stood in the silence that followed, staring at the fading glow of their departure. A faint warmth lingered in the air, like the remnants of a shared flame. He looked down at the spot on his chest where the hatchlings had slept and smiled faintly. "Guess we're not so different after all," he murmured. Far above, Karatha's deep voice rolled through the air like distant thunder. A single word carried on the wind, meant only for the human who had changed everything. Brother. And the fire faded into dawn.